After hitting 2 long balls last night, a 21-year-old now leads baseball in home runs. And somehow his talent is not the part of the story that's being talked about today, but rather the violation of nonsensical, unwritten rules. Hello everyone, I'm Chris Brown and welcome into today's edition of Around the Bases from 110 Sports, as always streaming live on the 110 Sports Network at 110sportsmedia.com/live, as well as twitch.tv/110sports, and available on demand on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and on the website. Just click on the videos section of 110sportsmedia.com. We will talk about the star that is Fernando Tatis Jr. and that situation in just a minute, but first, yesterday's action was perhaps the most exciting of any day yet in this 2020 regular season, at least from an offensive perspective. 48 home runs were hit across baseball, the second most of any day this season. 9 players had multi-homer games. That's tied for the second most on a single day in MLB history. That group included White Sox shortstop Tim Anderson, who's now hitting .340 with an OPS over 1,000. Cardinals infielder Brad Miller playing in his 4th game of the season. Mets second baseman Robinson Cano, who at 37 years old is showing he has plenty left in the tank. He's hitting .412 with 4 home runs and 13 RBI in 15 games. Cano tied Ryan Sandberg for the most multi-home run games by a second baseman in MLB history with 24. Among the other players to hit 2 home runs yesterday, the Mets first baseman Pete Alonso, who could be riding the ship after some early season struggles, and fellow New York first baseman, the Yankees' Luke Voit, who's continuing to emerge as one of the best hitting first basemen in the American League. He has 7 home runs in 18 games this season. Then there's 40-year-old designated hitter Nelson Cruz, who isn't slowing down one bit, 8 home runs, 23 RBIs, .354 batting average. And also hitting 2 home runs, 23-year-old top prospect White Sox center fielder Luis Robert, who's now hitting .286 with 5 homers and 4 steals. Then there's Fernando Tatis, who we're going to talk about here more momentarily, and Seattle Mariners first baseman Evan White. Also, amongst yesterday's excitement, Kyle and Corey Seager became the first pair of brothers on opposing teams to homer in the same game since 2001. Kyle Seager, of course, the Mariners' third baseman, Corey Seager, the Dodgers' shortstop, first pair of brothers on opposing teams to homer in the same game in 19 years. The Yankees completed a 4-game sweep of the Red Sox to mark the first time since the early 1950s that the team has won 10 straight against Boston. The Yankees are now 10-0 at home to start the season, with all those wins coming by at least 2 runs. The last time an MLB team did this to start the season, 1884. The St. Louis Maroons and the New York Gothams were the last teams to do it in 1884. Finally, we had 3 walk-offs last night because why not? Arizona over Oakland, Atlanta over Washington, and the Angels over the Giants. What a day of baseball it was yesterday, and I tell you, I had a full script lined up for the show, a full top 4. It seemed like it was already going to be a squeeze to get everything into the show today, and then last night happened. That's just a very brief synopsis of some of the exciting action that we saw last night, like I said, at least from an offensive perspective, though there were some good pitching performances as well. So as a result, I'm sneaking that information in there at the top of the show and adding a little bit more to the broadcast today. So let's go ahead and dive right in because we've got, like I said, a lot to talk about today as always. Here's what you can expect on the show. We're going to start with our top 4, as we always do. Added something to the top 4, had a top 4 set last night, and then Fernando Tatis Jr. happened. So we will talk about Fernando Tatis Jr. to lead off our top 4. Then we'll get into the latest on COVID-19's impact on Major League Baseball. The Cardinals are back in action, but we still haven't seen all 30 teams play on the same day this season since the fourth day of the season. It's been since the 4th day of the regular season since we've had all 30 teams playing on the same day. Still hasn't happened. We'll discuss that. plus a number of star players, particularly hitters. We've talked a lot about pitchers getting injured so far this season. A number of star hitters now on the injured list. We'll discuss that briefly. And a quick look at some game-wide trends that are interesting to begin this season. Some things that may be telling about the future of baseball, the way the game is being played. We'll discuss that coming up in our top four. Then, as always, we'll get into some news and notes. Then we'll go through our power rankings spotlight, as we always do on Tuesday. As always, I'm publishing the weekly MLB power rankings of all 30 teams. It's up on the website 110sportsmedia.com right now. Published yesterday, and as always, we'll take a look at some of the teams that have been rising and falling the most in those rankings over the last week or so. Finally, we'll wrap things up with a quick look at our stock watch, a couple players we haven't mentioned thus far on the show at that point who are trending up, and a couple who are trending down to wrap up today's broadcast. So a lot to get to, as I said. So let's go ahead and dive right in to our top four. This is the point that I certainly did not have planned for the broadcast when I thought I was pretty much done planning this show last night. And then this happened. So Fernando Tatis Jr. is incredible, and the criticism about unwritten rules in baseball continues to be ridiculous. Let's start with the incredible aspect of this, because I don't want something so ridiculous, which is what is grabbing the headlines right now, and we'll talk about it. I don't want something so ridiculous, this criticism of Tatis, to distract from his talent and what he is doing at the plate and in the field and on the base paths right now. So we'll start with the incredible aspect of Tatis Jr., which is what I had originally added when I decided, okay, we got to talk about Fernando Tatis, and then the second part we'll get to. So Mike Trout, Angels Mike Trout, became the first MLB player to reach double-digit home runs last season, going deep for the 9th time in 13 games since becoming a father. And that's where I was actually going to start the show. But not to be outshined, roughly half an hour later, Tatis launched his 10th home run of 2020, a 3-run shot in the 7th inning against the Rangers to move into a tie with Trout for the MLB lead. Then, the very next inning, the Padres shortstop hit a grand slam to claim the sole lead in homers in baseball with 11. And we'll talk more about the circumstances of that grand slam coming up. A 21-year-old now leads Major League Baseball in home runs with 11. A 21-year-old. Think about that for a second. The Padres shortstop became the youngest player with 7 RBI in a game in nearly 60 years. The first home run from him last night left the bat at 112.6 miles an hour. Then that grand slam, it had an exit velocity of almost 110 miles an hour, making it the hardest hit opposite field home run in the StatCast era, which has been tracking home run distances, launch angles, and all that exit velocity for the past, I want to say 5-6 years at this point. Tatis also became the fastest hitter in Padres history to reach 10 home runs in just 24 team games. His 11 home runs are the most by any player aged 21 or younger in his team's first 25 games of a season in MLB history. I'll repeat that. Among players 21 or younger, his 11 home runs in his team's first 25 games, the most of any player in MLB history to begin a season. I could go on and on and on with these incredible statistics. The point is, we've never seen anything like this from a player so young in MLB history, ever. For the season, Tatis Jr. is now hitting .305 with a .383 on-base percentage, .726 slugging percentage, 11 homers, 5 doubles, a triple, 22 runs, 28 RBIs. That's the most in baseball. And for good measure, 5 stolen bases in 5 attempts. Just incredible stuff. This is a generational talent who is probably over the next several years going to help change the dynamic of the game. I mean, this is this is an incredible talent. I'm without words to even describe what we're seeing from Fernando Tatis right now. It's sensational. But now let's go ahead and shift gears here to something else that is incredible. Incredibly absurd. That grand slam Tatis Jr. hit in the top of the 8th inning was with the bases loaded, of course, grand slam, on a 3-0 count with the team leading by 7 runs. Something that Texas manager Chris Woodward did not like. Woodward, according to the Dallas Morning News, saying, "I didn't like it personally. You're up by 7 in the 8th inning. It's typically not a good time to swing 3-0. It's kind of the way we were all raised in the game, but the norms are being challenged." That's Texas manager Chris Woodward. Before I react to that, I also want to point out that San Diego manager Jace Tingler's reaction, which also wasn't favorable. The Padres manager saying, "Just to make sure we get the signs 3-0 in that game," he said. "He's young, a free spirit, and focused, and all these things, and that's the last thing we'll ever take away. But that's a learning opportunity. That's it, and he'll grow from it. Just so you know, a lot of our guys have the green light on 3-0. But in this game in particular, we had a little bit of a comfortable lead, and we're not trying to run up the score or anything like that." For his part, Fernando Tatis Jr. apologized for missing the sign from his coach after the game. So my reaction to this has been the biggest thing in the baseball world, the biggest talking point this morning by far, and I think it was really important that we discussed what Tatis is doing at the plate first, because I think that's getting buried. I mean, everybody's leading with reaction to this, which it deserves reaction because it's absurd comments coming from MLB managers. But I think it's pushed too much. It's led to people not giving the attention to what Tatis Jr. is doing right now. So we started with that. But that being said, I want to react to these comments. First of all, regardless of how stupid these unwritten rules are, Tatis Jr. did miss a sign from his coaches. That seems to be pretty clear. He had gotten the take sign from third base coach, presumably, and he had missed it. And that's a mistake, but it's an incredibly common, incredibly small mistake in the grand scheme. Anybody who's played baseball at really any level for any significant period of time has missed a sign. It happens. And it's not a horrible thing inherently that the team would ask, that the team's sign would be for Tatis to take a pitch in that scenario. Bases loaded, 3-0 count with a big lead. Now that's not to at all excuse it's not all to, I'm not siding with Jace Tingler and the Padres, management there. I'm not siding with him or those comments or anything like that, but I'm just saying that that's a reality. A sign was missed, a mistake was made. It's not a horrible thing that sign was given for him to take the pitch. That being said, the reaction from Woodward to him to Tatis Jr. swinging in that scenario and hitting a home run there is utterly ridiculous. Couple things. One, if you don't want someone to swing on a 3-0 pitch, throw a good pitch. If you don't want someone to hit a home run on a 3-0 pitch, throw a good pitch. Number two, you play to win the game. You don't know what's going to happen. A 7-run deficit has been overcome before. That's what the Padres were leading the Rangers by 7 runs. A 7-run deficit has been overcome before. In 2016, the Padres lost a game that they led by 10 runs. Just last year, they won a game in which they trailed by 7 runs. You play to win the game. There's no really safe lead. If you're up by 25, but there's no safe lead. You play to win the game. Number 3, why is it that we expect players to just stop trying to win and to succeed at the plate, in the field, on the mound, when the score gets to some arbitrary point, at some arbitrary point in the game? Where's the point? Is it X number of runs in the X inning or later? Why is it that we expect players to just stop trying to succeed at some arbitrary point that's not clear and isn't written down and isn't a part of the rules? If managers on the losing team in this scenario, in these types of scenarios, think the players, pardon me, if managers on the losing teams in these scenarios, like Chris Woodward, think that the other team's players should just stop trying, then baseball needs to introduce some sort of white flag rule where they can just wave the white flag and end the games. If some manager's going to say, oh, we're losing by so much, the other team should just stop trying. If that's how it's going to be, then get a white flag and just call off the game together. Rather than expect, for no good reason at all, at some arbitrary point, that your opponent's just going to stop trying to be good at baseball. 4, why is it that some view these unwritten, unclear, unnecessary rules as more valuable than watching one of the best young talents in baseball swing a bat? Why is it that these vague, unclear, undefined, nudge, nudge, follow these rules even though they're not clear, that's somehow more valuable to the game to follow that than to let the game's young hitters, its best players, play to the best of their ability? I don't understand. Finally, number 5, Jace Tingler, the Padres manager, had a chance to defend his star shortstop and take a stand against this nonsense. He missed the mark. I understand that your player missed a sign to not swing. It was a mistake. One that's going to happen. For all players are going to miss signs at some point. But he had a chance to defend him and to take a stand against this nonsense. He did none of that. Fortunately, one good thing in this scenario, fans seem pretty darn united in their support of Tatis Jr.'s actions on this one. And in some ways, I kind of feel silly in arguing this so passionately because I'm not really arguing against that many people. It feels like, at least the people who are the fans of the game, the media of the game. It seems to be a pretty united front that this nonsense, unwritten rule stuff is ridiculous. Clearly, though, there are still plenty in the game who believe that we need to stick to these vague, unclear, nonsense things for all these reasons that go against everything that we just discussed. But it is good to see, from what I've seen, the reaction from several players on Twitter this morning and yesterday, former players, current players. We have the large contingent of fans, media members, they're all speaking in unison and generally speaking in unison in support of this being a fine thing for Tatis Jr. to do. But clearly, there are people in the game, managers in the game, prominent people playing the sport right now who still believe it's best to adhere to these nonsense rules. That's where we'll leave that item because we do have a lot of other things to talk about today. We'll move on to the rest of the script that I did have prepared for the rest of the show and get to some other headlines. Wrong one here. Here we go. So we're going to talk now about the latest on COVID-19's impact on Major League Baseball. A lot of little things to touch on here. We're going to go through this pretty quickly, just get you the latest information. It's been 23 days now, 23 since every MLB team has played a game on the same day. That dispiriting stretch was supposed to come to an end this past weekend when the Cardinals returned to the field for the first time in 2.5 weeks in Chicago against the White Sox following their COVID-19 outbreak. To be clear, the Cardinals did end up taking the field this weekend for the first time in a long time. In fact, they played 5 games in the past 3 days, winning 3 of them in pretty impressive fashion considering how long their layoff was. This as the team had 7 players make their MLB debuts over the weekend, and that's something that has led to a couple of ugly moments, including when Cardinals pitcher, the rookie Roel Ramirez, gave up 4 home runs in a row to the White Sox over the weekend. It's going to be a very busy schedule for St. Louis the rest of the way as they try to get as close to 60 games as possible, as is feasible, which means a lot of doubleheaders. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out the rest of the way for the Cardinals, but we're not going to get into that right now because that streak of consecutive days without all 30 MLB teams in action continued to this point because of a positive test from a Reds player, which was found out on Friday. As a result, the team's Saturday and Sunday games against the Pirates were postponed. Fortunately, C. Trent Rosecrans of The Athletic reported last night that there have been no new positive COVID-19 test results from the team's latest round of testing. Nonetheless, Major League Baseball announced today that out of an abundance of caution, tonight's game between the Reds and the Royals has been rescheduled as part of a doubleheader tomorrow to allow for additional testing. So there's no indication that there's any problems here, just that out of an abundance of caution, the Reds are going to go through another round of testing, make sure everything's clear, and then they will play a doubleheader tomorrow. There's really no harm in that. Of course, better to just play 9-inning games on days rather than trying to play two doubleheaders and play doubleheaders in a day. But generally speaking, there's no real harm in this. It's not messing up schedules all that much, so it makes sense. Meanwhile, let's talk about the latest involving the Indians. ESPN's Jeff Passan has some new reporting. It's a couple days old now about the Indian situation that we've been talking about last week a good bit. According to Passan, Mike Clevenger and Zach Plesac's decision to break health and safety protocols by going out with friends in Chicago created a rift within the clubhouse, with one player threatening to leave the team. Veteran reliever Oliver Perez apparently said in a team meeting last week he would opt out if the pair remained on the active roster, while superstar shortstop Francisco Lindor was also reportedly among those who were outspoken about the situation. While some in the clubhouse apparently accepted the pair's apologies, others remained upset about the breach in trust from Clevenger and Plesac. And then Zach Plesac, we didn't talk about it on Thursday because it came out later on Thursday after our last show, but I wrote about it on Friday's column at 110sportsmedia.com. Zach Plesac then posted a rambling 6.5-minute video where he blamed the media for their coverage of the situation. And apparently, according to Passan, that also bothered some of his teammates, as makes sense. It was a very clearly showed he did not understand the situation. He still did not get it. The pair was sent to the club's alternative training site on August 14th after they addressed their teammates in Detroit. The timeline for both of them returning to the team's active roster is unclear. Next item for you on COVID-19 related developments. The Miami Marlins are back to full health as all 18 players who tested positive for coronavirus have now been cleared to resume baseball activities and assigned to the team's alternative training site. MLB.com's Joe Frisaro reported that yesterday. That's absolutely good news. The Marlins appear, though, on the field to be coming back down to earth a bit after an incredible, improbable start. They've now dropped 6 of their last 8 games. Some changes to the reinstatement process for players who had tested positive for COVID-19. MLB Network's John Heyman reported Sunday that players who test positive for COVID-19 and continue to test positive can apply to return in 10 days. Players who request early reinstatement are likely to be allowed back after 14 days, even with continued positive tests, Heyman added. The Major League Baseball and its Players Association, their joint committee will still need to approve any returns. While this caused some stir, a few things to note. The league consulted Dr. Anthony Fauci about the new policy, and the belief is that the contagiousness of the virus dissipates over time. Additionally, epidemiologist Zachary Binnen, who's been active on Twitter discussing this situation with regards to the sports world, tweeting, "This is actually fine. It's consistent with the latest scientific knowledge and CDC guidance. It may sound sketchy, but I'll hit MLB when they do something bad. This is fine." Final note here on COVID-19 impacts. A league spokesperson told The Athletic's Ken Rosenthal that given the state of the virus throughout the country, this is a quote, "Given the state of the virus throughout the country and that most of our clubs do not have authorization from their local jurisdictions allowing for it, we are not able to consider hosting fans at this time. According to Rosenthal, Commissioner Rob Manfred addressed the matter with owners on his weekly call. The Rangers and Rockies have reportedly been among the teams pushing to allow some fans in the park for their home games. And that is that item. Our next top 4 item. We're going to go through this pretty quickly to save time here. Several star players have landed on the injured list in the last couple of days now. We've talked a lot about pitchers landing on the IL, and we're going to mention a couple of pitchers here, but a number of injuries to key hitters as well. Yankees second baseman DJ LeMahieu, the American League average leader, is expected to miss 2 to 3 weeks due to a sprained left thumb. Through 19 games, he was hitting .411 with a pair of homers and 15 runs scored. It's just the most recent of several key losses offensively for the Yankees, as outfielder Aaron Judge was placed on the IL on Friday with what was described as a very mild calf strain. He said Sunday, though, that he is actually 100% now and revealed that he begged the Yankees not to place him on the injured list. It sounds like he'll be ready to go when first eligible to be activated this weekend. The Yankees are also without Giancarlo Stanton, who remains sidelined with a hamstring strain. His timeline to return is 2 to 3 weeks. There are reasons for optimism, though, for the Yankees offensively, because unlike so many teams who would be really significantly hit by losing 3 players of that caliber, the Yankees just keep having other guys step up. Clint Frazier and Mike Tauchman in the outfield have succeeded in their limited at-bats this season. Giovanni Urshela and Luke Voigt on the corner infield spots for the team have backed up impressive 2019 seasons. Other injury updates. The Padres outfielder Tommy Pham suffered a broken hamate bone in his right hand while fouling off a pitch on Sunday. He's expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Padres closer Kirby Yates, this is our first pitcher to mention, he was placed on the injured list Saturday and is dealing with bone chips in the back of his elbow. It sounds like, according to some recent reports, he is likely to have season-ending surgery. He's been one of the best closers in baseball in recent years, but it struggled out of the gate. Drew Pomerantz is serving as the team's closer. This next one's really rough to see. Toronto shortstop Bo Bichette is now on the injured list with a knee injury. Sportsnet's Shi Davidi reporting last night that he has been diagnosed with a grade 1 strain of a ligament in his knee. Per that report, the injury is considered minor and it should have no long-term impact for Bichette, though there is still no timetable for his return. It's looking like that'll be sometime in September. The 22-year-old was hitting .361 with an OPS north of 1,000 and 5 homers, as well as 4 steals in 14 games. He's been really fun to watch. This is a big blow to a Blue Jays team that has some talent but is not been able to get it going. Star Atlanta Braves outfielder Ronald Acuna Jr., one of the other young stars in baseball, was placed on the injured list over the weekend with lingering left wrist inflammation. Manager Brian Snitker said Monday there's no timetable for his return. The team's also without second baseman Ozzie Albies due to a wrist injury. He took swings on Monday, but manager Brian Snitker saying he still has some lingering discomfort, no clear timetable for his return as well. We'll talk more about the Braves in our Power Rankings Spotlight. Veteran Astros outfielder Michael Brantley is on the IL with right quad discomfort. He's not expected to miss too much time. Finally, this final note of an injury seems like a little bit of old news, but it's another big weekend development. Washington Nationals starting pitcher Steven Strasburg's timeline to return is unclear after a reoccurrence of a hand issue knocked him out of his Friday start in the first inning. He's been diagnosed with carpal tunnel of the right hand. This is a big blow to the Nationals. There's a very limited history of this type of condition among MLB pitchers, so it's really unclear what his timeline is at this point. And that is our injury updates. Final top 4 item here, as we're going a little bit long on this segment today. Do want to mention this, though, some interesting early season trends to discuss. Last week, Baseball Reference tweeted a very interesting statistic. The average time between balls in play in 2020 has been 3 minutes and 52 seconds, at least as of last week when that was tweeted out. That is the highest of any season in the site's database, which ranges back for decades and decades and decades. Baseball Reference also tweeted out a chart showing how the time has pretty steadily increased from year to year for decades. As ESPN's Jeff Passan noted, the 3 minute and 52 second mark between balls in play for this season is 36 seconds higher than 2011. That's a roughly 20% increase. Baseball players today are more skilled than they have ever been, I really believe. But the three true outcome nature of the game that we're seeing so much today, either a home run, a walk, or a strikeout, is leading to really decreased action in terms of on the field, players trying to make plays, movement. As Passan noted, players are striking out at the second highest rate ever to begin the 2020 season, trailing only 2019. And batting average is at its lowest league-wide, lowest mark since 1968, back when the mound was moved. Don't get me wrong, strikeouts and home runs can be really exciting, and players can show emotion, and walks, while very boring, can be very underrated. But when people talk about baseball being boring, maybe this is an aspect that should really be examined more by those in the game. The fact that you're watching a baseball game and minutes and minutes and minutes, more time is going by between actually seeing on the field action. That's a big factor in what's people. It could be a big factor in people, saying baseball is boring. Something more important to look at and see how you could address than some of the other attempted solutions baseball has tried. In his latest 20 questions story, Passan also noted a few other interesting game-wide trends to begin the season. Teams are averaging .47 stolen bases per season. That's the lowest since 1971. That's another form of exciting action decreasing stolen bases. And with the designated hitter in the National League this season, sacrifice bunts have drastically decreased. We're at just .05 per game. That's the rate, which is a nearly 66% decrease from 2019. Not that sack bunts are particularly exciting most of the time, but some interesting trends nonetheless. Again, the overall point here, the nature of the game today is making it so that there's less frequent on the field action. So much strikeouts, home runs, or walks. And that's something baseball should really take a closer look at, I think, as it looks for ways to make the game more interesting to younger audiences who aren't going to have as long of an attention span, who you need to look at that time. It's a trend. It keeps growing. Baseball may need to consider some ways, some methods, some ideas to reverse course on that one. All right, we are a little past 1:30 Eastern here on this Tuesday. Thanks for being with us here for an extended top four. A lot to talk about, so glad that we got through that. Glad that we got to cover all of that. We are going to go ahead and take our first break of the show. When we come back, we'll go through a rapid-fire news and notes, and then we will get into our power rankings spotlight for this week. That's all coming up next on ATB Live from 110 Sports. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to ATB Live from 110 Sports, streaming live on the 110 Sports Network, 110sportsmedia.com/live, twitch.tv/110sports. I'm Chris Brown. Thanks for being with us here on this Tuesday, August 18th. Or if you're not live, thank you for listening on demand, watching on demand on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on the website. We're going to go ahead and dive right in. We still got a lot to get to today, so let's go ahead and dive into some rapid fire news and notes, including our first item here, something that originally I had included in our top four for today, but got bumped out because of the need to talk about Fernando Tatis, of course. So our top news and note item today is the Tigers. Tigers general manager Al Avila made headlines yesterday morning announcing that 3 of the team's top 6 prospects are being called up for their major league debuts. The group is undoubtedly headlined by pitcher Casey Mize, the first overall selection in the 2018 draft. The 23-year-old right-hander is ranked as the eighth best prospect in Major League Baseball by MLB Pipeline. He pitched to a 2.55 ERA in 2 minor league levels last season, 106 strikeouts to 23 walks in 109 innings. Mize features a 4-pitch arsenal. Really impressive prospect. The big question, the big problem with him in the past has been health, as he's dealt with multiple arm and shoulder injuries in past years. So that'll be something to keep an eye on, but the upside is great for Casey Mize. Of course, he is the headliner, but another interesting arm is left-hander Tariq Skubal, who will start tonight against the White Sox. He is Detroit's number 5 prospect and the 50th ranked in baseball by MLB Pipeline. 23-year-old had a 2.42 ERA, 179 strikeouts to 37 walks in roughly 122 innings between high A and double A last year. The third and final prospect in the team's top 6 getting the call is infielder Isaac Paredes. He is the 6th, like I said, the 6th ranked prospect in the Tigers organization, just 21 years old. He was acquired from the Cubs in a trade 2 years ago. He batted .282 with 13 homers and 5 steals at Double A last year in 130-ish games. Batted 8th and manned third base in his MLB debut last night. He picked up his first hit with a 2 RBI single. As for what this means for the Tigers, they are 9-11 on the season after dropping 6 straight. Fortunately, given their surprisingly good start, they're still right now in contention, given the expanded playoffs at this point, despite being a couple games under 500. I'm far from convinced that the Tigers are going to be able to stop their slide back to what we thought they were all going to be. But with the expanded playoffs, crazy things, could happen. These prospects could make a big impact. I still don't expect the Tigers to make the playoffs, even with these. Even if these arms and this hitter do perform pretty well. But it would be very on brand, I will say, for 2020 if the Tigers were to somehow make the 2020 playoffs. A few other quick notes for you. Washington Nationals infielder Luis Garcia, the team's number 2 prospect, became the first MLB player born in the 2000s to hit a home run at the big league level last night, going deep off of the Braves' Touki Toussaint in the second inning. The rookie is the youngest player in Major League Baseball right now at 20 years and 94 days old. A fun fact for you, Garcia was starting in place of the injured Starlin Castro, who himself was the first player born in the 1990s to hit a home run in the majors. The Yankees yesterday activated closer Aroldis Chapman from the COVID-19 IL. He'd missed the first 3.5 weeks of the season after his diagnosis, but has jumped right back into the closer's role. The Indians announced yesterday that they've demoted struggling outfielder Oscar Mercado to their alternative training site. He finished 8th in AL Rookie of the Year voting last year following a strong season, 15 steals, 15 homers in 115 games. This season, though, 0 extra base hits, 111 average in his first 48 plate appearances. Finally, Mets ace Jacob deGrom is slated to return to the team's starting rotation tomorrow against the Marlins. He was scratched from his last start due to a neck issue, but he's now good to go. The reigning NL Cy Young winner is off to a strong start with a 2-0 record and 2.45 ERA, as well as a 28-5 strikeout to walk ratio through 4 starts. And that is today's news and notes. So we're going to go ahead and move right along now to our Power Rankings Spotlight, which is a segment we have here on the show every Tuesday. As I mentioned, every Monday I publish on the website updated MLB power rankings, all 30 teams, a paragraph with some stats and information, rationale for their positioning for every single team. That's on the website every week. And so every Tuesday here on the show, we discuss some teams who are falling, some teams who are on the rise, and a couple of other notable teams here if we have the time. Not a lot of big time movers in the rankings this week. Some minor shuffling in the top 10, but the teams in the top 10 remain the same. Dodgers are 1, Yankees 2, and the Athletics round out the top 3. We'll talk about them. Twins are 4, Cubs 5, the Rays are up to 6. Then you've got the Indians at 7, Braves at 8, Astros are 9th, and the Rockies round out the top 10. So we'll talk a little bit about a couple of those teams, especially the Athletics. But since we didn't have any drastic changes in the top 10, we're going to talk a lot more in this segment about some of the teams that are on the fringes of making of the playoff picture at this point. Those teams who, in the power rankings, generally speaking, are in the the 22, 23 up to 10, 12 range. That middle of the power rankings where you've got teams who have performed really well, but could they slip back to out of the playoff pictures, or teams that we expected could be contenders who right now aren't there, but they could still rebound. We'll talk about a lot of those teams today, so let's go ahead and dive right in with some teams that are falling, and it's only appropriate to start with the Boston Red Sox. It is hard to watch. It is very difficult to watch the Boston Red Sox right now. They are 6-17. Remember, this is a team that won the World Series just a couple of years ago. They are 6-17. They've dropped 8 games in a row. They were swept in back-to-back 4-game series by the Rays and the Yankees. Recently, their pitchers allowed 8 or more runs in 6 straight games for the first time in franchise history. Collectively, a 6.47 ERA in the month of August. That's pretty much all you need to know about the Red Sox. I mean, it is ugly right now what's happening with the Red Sox. They've got a talented middle of the lineup, J.D. Martinez, Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts, but there's some struggling hitters in there. Devers has struggled. Martinez has struggled to get things going. Even if they do, though, that pitching staff is just atrocious. Didn't expect the Red Sox to fall in my rankings all the way down to 27th this week. They were 21st last week. I consider dropping them all the way to 29th. I'm not going to put them below the Pirates, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them fall another spot or two next week. I expected the Red Sox weren't going to be great, but a lot of people did. Didn't expect them to be great, but this is just rough to see. Another team that's falling is the Los Angeles Angels. In my rankings, they were 20th last week, 25th this week. They are 8-15 on the season, following a walk-off win against San Francisco last night. Anthony Rendon appears to be just fine. He homered in 5 of the team's 6 games during their most recent homestand and had hits last night. Dylan Bundy's been incredible. Mike Trout has been incredible. Yet the Angels have lost 7 of their last 10 games, 8-15. There's talent here, but it's becoming a pretty big hole to dig out of. They're going to have to start soon. Like I said, there's talent here. We'll have to see if they can do it. They're going to have to start the turnaround soon in a shortened season like this. Another team that's fallen, the Blue Jays fell from 19th to 23rd. We already discussed the Blue Jays a little bit. The big thing there, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is so young. The talent is still there. There's still plenty of time, but he's not hitting well to begin the season. And Bo Bichette, the loss of him for a significant period of time here due to an injury, a big blow to that team. Their pitching staff also hasn't fared very well in the month of August either. That's not helping matters. That young offense has talent, but with Bichette's injury, with Guerrero not hitting, it's not looking too great for the Blue Jays right now. The Mets have fallen again on 4 more spots this week from 18th to 22nd. They are now 10-14. When I wrote this story on Sunday, they had fallen to the bottom of the NL East standings. Their starting rotation right now is essentially being held together by Scotch tape. Steven Matz has given up 23 earned runs in 23 innings, a 9 ERA. Rick Porcello has a 5.76 ERA. Michael Wacha remains sidelined. Fortunately, Jacob deGrom is going to be starting, as we mentioned, tomorrow, but that's about all they got of any promise in their rotation right now, for the most part. Not great. That lineup, though, is pretty great. Pete Alonso, their first baseman, looks like he might be breaking out of it. Cano has plenty left in the tank. J.D. Davis has been good. Dominic Smith has been really good for the Mets. There is talent in that lineup. Pitching staff, though, really concerning. Maybe they'll be able to make a trade right now, though. Mets continue to sink in the rankings. Final team that's falling I want to mention here is the Washington Nationals. Last week 14th, this week 17th in the power rankings. They are 8-12. And they just haven't been able to get any traction. A huge part of it, though, you can blame on injuries with Steven Strasburg, as we mentioned earlier in the show, on the IL. Unclear timeline for him to return. The team's number 3 hitter, Starlin Castro, also mentioned him earlier. He's on the injured list due to a broken right wrist. Things aren't looking great for the Nationals right now. They haven't been able to get any traction. There's real offensive concerns, though Juan Soto, the young outfielder, hitting .409 with 7 homers in 12 games after missing the first week plus of the season. He's been incredible in making up for lost time for the Nationals. But there's real concern right now still for the defending world champs. 8-12 record. There's time for them to, with the expanded playoffs, this isn't a horrible record. They're not that far below 500, but they're going to have to get things going pretty soon. All right, a couple teams that are trending up here. We'll fly through these pretty quickly. The Texas Rangers are one team that's trending up. They are just a game under 500 now. They were 26th last week. I bumped them up 6 spots to 20th. A lot more about the teams that fell behind them than them, but they've started to find some traction. They've won 7 of their last 9 games before a rough 14-4 loss to the Padres last night. Lance Lynn continues to dominate, pitching like an ace. He is an ace right now. A 1.11 ERA, 36 strikeouts. He threw a 2-hit complete game at Coors Field. I mean, who does that? On the offensive end, Elvis Andrus has struggled, but Todd Frazier and 25-year-old Isaiah Kiner-Falefa have both impressed as the team's primary corner infielders. So there's some interesting potential for the Rangers. I think they'll hang around this 20 range of the power rankings for a lot of the rest of the season. It's possible that they could certainly make a run and get themselves really in the playoff picture. It's also very possible that they could fall off and fall back pretty quickly as well. So we'll see. Another team that's rising very briefly here is the Arizona Diamondbacks. 23rd last week. They're up to 19th this week. They are above 500 for the first time this season after 5 straight wins, including a sweep of the Padres. Heading into yesterday, they were averaging 8.2 runs per game in their last 6 games. The bats appear to be finally coming alive for the Diamondbacks. There's real pitching concern. Madison Bumgarner still sidelined, but Zach Gallen has been pitching really well. And like I said, the offense, which I really was optimistic on, really high on the Diamondbacks offense heading into this season, it's been better lately after a really slow start. David Peralta, Starling Marte, Cole Calhoun in the outfield have been really good in the month of August. Concerned about the pitching, but I keep saying that about every team, and I really believe this Arizona offense can be one of the best, one of the better offenses in the National League. So we'll see where they go from here. The Orioles, we have to mention them. They were the biggest riser in this week's power rankings. Despite a series loss to the Nationals this past weekend, the Orioles have kept up their pretty strong, very surprisingly strong start to the 2020 season. They were widely projected to be the worst team in baseball record-wise. I certainly thought so. We're going to have to treat them more seriously. Me bumping them up from 27th up to 18th this week, a big jump, isn't necessarily that they did anything incredible this past week, but more the idea that I feel like I can't ignore the Orioles anymore. They're 12-9. The Orioles are 12-9. And the numbers are supporting it. Now, these numbers probably, for a lot of these hitters, aren't going to last. They're, career performances so far that we're not going to see last. But compared to some other teams like the Tigers that got off to impressive starts, the numbers in terms of, what the players are doing makes sense that they have that kind of a record. The Orioles this season are 4th in the American League in runs scored, 2nd in average, 2nd in OPS. The Baltimore Orioles. There's a lot of hitters that, we could highlight from my story and what I looked into. Outfielder Anthony Santander and shortstop Jose Iglesias have both been incredible. Entering Monday, Santander was tied for fourth in the American League with 7 homers and was first in the league in 22 RBI with 22 RBI. Iglesias has been a glove first guy. He's dealing with a bit of an injury right now, but he's been a glove first guy, poor hitter for his entire career basically. He's hitting 400 through 55 at bats this season. I don't think it's going to last. Again, these players, like Jose Iglesias, is not going to hit 400. But the Orioles have been really impressive, and we have to start taking them seriously. And that's what my big bump of them in the power rankings is reflective of this week. Final team I want to talk about on the rise is the Oakland Athletics. The A's have been one of the hottest teams in baseball. They moved into my top 3 this week. Despite a walk-off loss to the Diamondbacks last night, the A's are 16-7. Heading into the week when I wrote this story for the second week in a row, the A's led baseball, tied with the Dodgers this week, for wins heading into the start of the week. This past week, they became the 4th team in the modern era to win back-to-back games despite trailing by 3 or more runs in the 9th inning or later. Some late-game heroics from the A's, as we've been accustomed to seeing to some degree in recent years. Matt Olson has been raking despite a low batting average. Outfielders, they've gotten good production from the outfield, which was one of the weaker spots of their offense coming into the season. Robbie Grossman, Ramon Laureano, Mark Canha, Stephen Piscotty have been really good offensively, especially of late. And the A's have, entering yesterday, had won 13 of their last 15 games. The A's are legit. We need to give them the respect that they deserve. They are the 3rd-ranked team in this week's power rankings. And those are a look at some teams that are falling in the rankings, that are on the rise right now. We had to kind of go through that pretty quickly, I know, but just trying to get everything in here on the show today. Final, very, very brief notes on the power rankings. A few other notable teams. The Astros only moved up 1 spot from 10th to 9th, but their slide could be over at this point. It looks like, at least for now, 5 straight wins. 5 straight wins for the Astros. The team's starters have fared really well of late. They're still concerned about Jose Altuve, who's still struggling to begin the season. It's not a perfect scenario. It's not time to, put the Astros back up to, 3 or 4 in the power rankings, but they may have stopped their skid that had really struggled to begin the season. Also, the Braves, I said we'd mention them. Not going to get into them too much. They're 14-10 right now. They're 8th in this week's power rankings. Dropped a couple of spots. They're just really banged up right now with Albies and Acuna sidelined. Max Fried, though, has pitched really well at the top of the rotation in place, in the absence of Mike Soroka. Another team that's been interesting, the Tampa Bay Rays are up 2 spots from 8th to 6th this week. They've won 8 of their last 9 games to move into a close second in the AL East behind the Yankees. Blake Snell's pitching well. Brandon Lau has been great. And Willy Adames, that's the team's middle infield duo. So the Tampa Bay Rays, a team that I'm really high on. Heading into this season, they got off to a slow start. I stuck with them in being optimistic, and they've really gotten things going of late. All right, just time for one quick final break here on the show. When we come back, a really rapid-fire look at our stock watch. We'll be right back. This is ATB Live from 110 Sports. All right, welcome back to ATB Live from 110 Sports. I'm Chris Brown. Just time for a rapid fire edition of our Stock Watch, which is a regular feature we do at the end of the show on Tuesdays, telling you about a couple players we haven't discussed yet on this show who are trending up and trending down of late. 3 players that are trending down. We're going to go through this rapid fire, and if we have time, we'll discuss it more on Thursday. I'm going to save a couple of these for Thursday, going in depth. Josh Bell, the Pirates' first baseman. Breakout year last year. This year, 203 batting average with 2 homers through 18 games. Doesn't have great support in that lineup. On Thursday, we'll discuss a little bit about some of the underlying things that are happening with Josh Bell. White Sox starting pitcher Lucas Giolito was one of the worst pitchers in baseball 2 years ago. Breakout last year, though there was some inconsistency this year. He has struggled. He got beat around by the Cardinals on Saturday. 5 starts this season, a 4.88 ERA, and he seems to be having some controlled problems again. We'll discuss that on Thursday as well. Dodgers outfielder Cody Bellinger, despite a 2-homer game this past week, still hitting just 181 on the season. Really struggling, but the Dodgers still in great position, so we'll discuss Cody Bellinger and some of the things that he made a change this past offseason. Could that be affecting his performance this year? Rapid fire on some players trending up. Angels third baseman Anthony Rendon, as we mentioned, 5 homers in 6 games in the team's most recent homestand. He had been struggling to start the year. 5 homers in 6 games. Then he goes 3 for 4 last night against the Giants. He's just fine. Phillies catcher JT Realmuto is off to an incredible start to this season. 300 with 8 homers, 20 RBI through 16 games. This is the best catcher in baseball. Make no mistake about it. Remember, he's set to be a free agent this upcoming offseason. A lot of intrigue about will the Phillies re-sign him or what's going to happen there. Finally, Shane Bieber, the Indians starter, he's off. His incredible and historic start to the season has continued on Saturday. 11 strikeouts and 7 scoreless against the Tigers. His season numbers to this point, a 1.30 ERA, the 3rd best among MLB qualifiers, and an MLB high 54 strikeouts and 34 2/3 innings. Those 54 strikeouts for Bieber through his first 5 appearances are the most of any player since Pedro Martinez in 2001. And that's a very rapid-fire edition of our Stock Watch for today. As I mentioned, we're going to discuss some of those players who have struggled, Lucas Giolito, Cody Bellinger, Josh Bell, and others, coming up on our show on Thursday. So we'll get more time for that. I just wanted to mention that briefly, but it made sense to devote more of our time to our top stories at the top of the show today. Final notes for you, the MLB trade deadline is just under 2 weeks away, so we'll talk about that a good bit next week and also possibly on Thursday's show as well. Also on Thursday's show, we'll discuss the latest on MLB's plans for the postseason, some new reporting from ESPN's Jeff Passan today, just this morning. Couldn't fit it into the show. It's not exactly time sensitive right now. So we'll discuss that. A bubble looking more and more likely. We'll discuss that coming up on Thursday as well. But that is going to do it for today's edition of Around the Bases from 110 Sports. We'll be back with you on Thursday. A reminder that 110 Sports live coverage continues with the J Mole Show tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, then Touchline Talk with Josh Doring at 11 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. Around the Bases back with you on Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And for the latest of our 110 Network shows available on demand, you can go to the website, click on the audio or the video tabs on the top of the homepage. You can also subscribe to 110 Sports on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube for our latest shows, podcasts, and on the website you can get our latest written content. Right side of the homepage you can also subscribe to the 110 Sports newsletter, delivering the latest 110 Sports coverage, everything we have to your inbox every Friday morning. So keep an eye out for that. Subscribe to that on the 110sportsmedia.com. So thanks for being with us. Busy show today. Appreciate you joining us here on this Tuesday. Lots to talk about on Thursday as well. We'll be back reacting to the very latest. For now, though, have a great rest of your Tuesday and a great Wednesday as well. And stay safe. And I will talk to you on Thursday.